The Nakano Thrift Shop by Mieko Kawakami, and All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. These are two books with a couple of similarities. They are both Japanese fiction, both written by someone called Kawakami. They both use funky photography on their covers. They're both short, and they're both books I happen to have read recently. So let's review them. The Nakano Thrift Shop. This depicts the goings-on at a thrift shop in Japan where antiques are snubbed for being too specialist, but used eyeglasses are a top seller. The book is told from the point of view of Hitomi, a young woman working at the thrift shop. She works alongside the owner, Mr. Nakano, who has a strange way of speaking, starting conversations as if he were already in the middle of saying something. There's also Takeo, a young man who doesn't have a lot to say, and Nakano's sister, who seems to pop in to help in her spare time. The book is told in the form of multiple chapters or vignettes themed around an object and telling the day-to-day lives of the thrift shop's occupants. While there is an overarching romance, sort of, there is definitely an episodic feel. This is the closest I've gotten to slice of life since Legends and Lattes. This is a very slow, relaxed book. This is actually quite a good thing for the time that I was reading this. I needed that kind of palate cleanser, that easy to pick up and read. And it doesn't outstay its welcome, kind of like Legends and Lattes. Its shortness is to its benefit, because I feel like any longer and you'd probably start to get a little bit bored. At the same time, some people reading this might be missing out on a little bit of bite or spice. So we do have some romances. The older owner of the shop, I think is cheating on his wife. There's definitely a mistress that is part of the story who comes in every now and then, and so we see what's going on with him and her. And then there's also a very weird romance between the main character and the young man who also works in the shop. But it comes across as a romance that happens just because they happen to spend a lot of time with each other, and not necessarily because they get on amazingly well or because they have something in common. It's very strange. It's almost like they start a romance to have something to do, but there are feelings. The main character does get invested and does get upset when things go wrong. So it is a real romance. It's just a bit of an odd one. And you could say that awkwardness is probably a good descriptor for this book. In general, you have the owner who has a really bizarre way of speaking. And in fact, the formatting of the book is quite strange as well. You have these run-on paragraphs and sentences without speech marks where people are speaking to each other. I am kind of curious if that's a technique that's common in Japanese fiction, because it also comes up in All the Lovers in the Night, though not to the same degree at all. Like, it's almost as if most or like half of the speech marks are just removed from this book. So it's very awkward. Everyone's a little bit funny. Has a strange way of speaking, so you kind of have to get into the vibe to enjoy the book. Overall, I would say I did enjoy my time with it, but I don't know if I'm going to rush out and find another one of her books. Maybe in a few months or a year or so, when I'm drowning in dense fantasy books again and I just need something easy. It was fun, and I would only recommend it if that's what you're after. If you're after an easy read, but if you want anything with much substance, this may be not the Japanese fiction to go for. All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami. Yes, it's here, finally. I've been waiting for this book, and I will say, if you've read Breast and Eggs, you could probably just skip this review, I'll say that you'll probably still really enjoy this book, and there's no need to keep watching because I'm going to touch on some things that happen in the book, and you might want to go in blind. So if you leave this video now, I don't mind, as long as it means that you're going to go pick this up. All the Lovers in the Night is about Fuyuko Irie, a woman in her mid-30s working as a proofreader. At one point, she worked in an office, but after a suggestion and a bit of a push from a co-worker, she's encouraged to go full-time with her freelancing work. This means, like many of us over the last couple of years, that Fuyuko works entirely from her home and most days has no obligation to leave her apartment to see other people. It's clear that Fuyuko is a woman dealing with immense anxiety and possibly depression as well. She struggles to talk with other people and she has no major relationships in her life other than her manager from work. That is until she meets an older high school teacher at the local culture centre. So if you're still here, let's have a chat. I'm not going to go into deep spoilers. I did actually go into spoilers in a vlog. I don't know when I'm going to bring that out. So look forward to that if you have read this as well and you want to hear more of a discussion about it. But I will discuss the main points at the start of the book. So where to start with this book? This is a book about someone who blatantly has a lot of social anxiety and most likely depression as well. She's always struggled to speak to people, I think. There is a incident that we get a flashback of her life, so be aware that there is a chapter with essay in it, and I think this kind of does explain why she is the way she is right now, but there's also a lot to her that is also just already there. She never really spoke to people when she was a child either. So I think it's sort of like problems stacked on top of problems. And it's, in fact, that's her personality. It's a lot of issues and problems compounding on each other to sort of make things worse. So a good example of this is that she meets up with her co-worker slash manager. She's sort of like a line manager. And she's invited out for drinks and she just lets her line manager babble and mouth off about other co-workers, and she's quite happy to sit and listen. And during this interaction, her co-worker is knocking back drink after drink, and Fuyuko says she can't drink. She's tried it once, it made her feel very sick, so she's never tried it again. So she's just having those mango mocktails and just listening to her co-worker. And yet we jump ahead a little bit to a scene where she's trying out going to the culture centre and getting a feel for whether she wants to take a course in something, anything. And while she's there, she's like 3 beers and a cup of sake in before she gets there. Like, she even takes a flask of sake with her to the centre. And this becomes a habit, is probably the nicer way of putting it. But addiction is probably the more correct way. From then on, she does have a habit of trying to have a flask of alcohol with her, and it kind of becomes a bit of a crutch. You see, that co-worker did have a little bit of a influence on her, because she said, oh, alcohol, it like loosens you up. And she's using it in this way, but has clearly gone way too far. To the point where she's feeling very sick. The anxiety and the alcohol she has compound together to make one very sick woman. So we're never really told, or we're never really told why she started. We're never shown the moment when it first starts. We're sort of like skip over that. And that's because this book kind of relies you on reading between the lines a little bit. It's not like obscure. It should kind of be obvious what's going on, really. And like I said, that's why when I say depression, no, it's never labelled, it's never said out loud, but she's a woman who starts to go to bed in the middle of the day and sleeps through huge chunks of the day. And this is a sign of depression. It's one of many signs. And then we have a sort of friendship turning into a romance with an older man who is a high school teacher. And this romance is very weird. So this is something it actually has in common with Nakano Thrift Shop, in that there's a romance, but the interaction between these two people is very odd. They have very simple conversations, small talk in one hand and out of nowhere topics in the other. It can be a very simple, yes, it's hot. It's hot today. Yes. Yes. And on the other, what is light made of? So it did remind me actually of The Housekeeper and the Professor a little bit, because in that book we have a lot of mathematics discussion, and in this we had a lot of discussion about how light works. That kind of keeps coming up. And it's quite sweet because before that point, Fuko just seems like a bit of an empty shell, just sort of drifting through life, and then we find out that there is this thing that she's been thinking of, and she happens to be with someone who understands it and will try and explain it to her, and is happy to discuss this with her. So it's quite sweet, but it doesn't quite go in the direction you would expect. Kawakami, I think, doesn't really want to give you a neat wrapped up story. I think she really just wants to show you a snapshot of someone's life at a point where things are changing, but they're not changing. Is it fair to say they're not changing a lot? I think she just come out of this book a bit of a changed woman, not by a massive amount, but just enough that I think we have hope that her life will improve a little bit. I also have to give a shout out to the prose in this book. It's not something, it doesn't bother me when books have simple prose, but obviously it's such a plus when there's something there. There really is a lot of poetic language in this, and I have to give a shout out to the translators. Sambat, David Boyd, that's not one, to the translators, Sambat and David Boyd, because it absolutely works so well in English. It is so beautiful and sad, and it really, it's just good, guys. So if you can tell, I massively recommend it. I really think this is a 5-star book, like Breasts and Eggs. I've said it before, Heaven was a good book, but it was just too heavy for me. So if that's the case for you, don't worry. I mean, obviously there are heavy topics in this, but it's not to that extreme. I really think this is beautiful, and you really empathise with this character, even as she's making very horrible mistakes. So please give this a go, or if you haven't, go read Breasts and Eggs as well. It's one of my absolute favourite books. Kawakami, you're amazing, and I'm really sad I didn't go to get a ticket for the signing at Oxford, but I'm gonna keep watching out for what she brings out, because so far it has all been fantastic. So that was the Nakano Thrift Shop and All the Lovers in the Night, and I've been Emma. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!